All right, welcome back everybody to the deep dive. Workplace safety, that's something we think about a lot here. And today we're gonna go deep on something so basic but so essential, to almost every job out there.
Right.
We're talking personal protective equipment, or as most people know it, PPE.
Yeah, PPE, the hard hats, the safety glasses, the gloves, steel toe boots, respirators, you name it.
Yeah, and we're not just, chatting about, what kind of gloves look cool or whatever.
Right.
We've got an actual section of U.S. law, a real regulation here, that lays out the rules of the road when it comes to PPE in the workplace.
Exactly. This stuff can seem a little dry. I know. Legal language. Who wants to wade through that?
Yeah, not exactly a beach read.
But trust me, what's in this document, it directly impacts your safety at work. And it's really important to know what your rights are and what your responsibilities are when it comes to PPE.
Absolutely. So think of this deep dive as your guide, cutting through the legal jargon, getting to the heart of what this regulation really means for you.
It's exactly.
Like, when is PPE actually required? Who's got to make sure it's available? And here's the big one. Who pays for it?
That's a big question.
Big question, big question. So let's get into it. The regulation starts with a core principle. It says, if there are hazards in your workplace, and that could be from the actual processes you're doing, the environment you're working in, or even specific dangers like chemicals, radiation, machinery, anything that could potentially cause you injury or make you sick through contact, breathing in something, or even your skin absorbing something.
Right.
Then protective equipment, it has to be provided, it's got to be used,
Yeah.
and it needs to be properly maintained. And we're not talking about just one or two things here.
No.
This covers a huge range of PPE: eye protection, face protection, head protection, things for your hands, your feet, protective clothing, respirators, shields, barriers, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, it makes it very clear that safety, it needs to be a top priority.
Yeah.
I think most people could get on board with that.
Yeah, right. Now, here's something that might surprise some folks out there, especially, if you're used to bringing your own gear to work.
Okay.
This regulation, it specifically addresses what happens when you're using your own PPE, your own safety glasses, your own boots, whatever it might be.
Right.
Even if it's your own stuff, your employer still has a responsibility there.
They do.
They have to make sure that your personal PPE is actually adequate for the specific hazards of your job.
So you got to be the right stuff for the job.
Exactly. And that it's properly maintained. Things need to be in good working order.
Right. Well-maintained, sanitary, got to be clean.
Yeah. Sanitary, clean. That's a good point.
Yeah.
It really drives home the fact that when it comes to workplace safety, the ultimate responsibility often falls on the employer. They're the ones who have to ensure that the workplace is safe.
They do, yeah. Even though, like you said, you might prefer your own pair of boots,
Sure.
Or maybe you've got prescription safety glasses, something like that, they still need to double check that the protection those are offering, it's up to snuff.
Yeah.
It meets the standards. It's appropriate for the hazards you might be facing in your specific role.
Mm-hmm.
It really comes down to their responsibility. The employer's responsibility isn't just about handing out gear.
Right?
It's about making sure the workplace is truly safe.
Yeah. It's that safety piece. Okay, so let's talk about how employers actually figure out what kind of PPE is needed in the first place.
Okay.
The regulation, it lays out 2 really important things.
All right.
Safe design and proper fit. So first off, all PPE has to be, designed and built for the specific work being done. That makes sense, right?
It's got to be fit for purpose.
Fit for a purpose, exactly. But then there's the fit piece. It says the PPE must actually fit each employee correctly. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. You can't just hand everyone the same pair of gloves and call it a day.
No, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, PPE that doesn't fit right, that can be almost as dangerous as not having any PPE at all.
Yeah.
Imagine safety glasses that are constantly slipping down your nose.
Oh, I hate that.
Or gloves that are so bulky you can't properly hold your tools. Or a hard hat that's always, tilting over your eyes. The regulation's right to emphasize this. Safety equipment, it needs to be tailored to the individual user, the person actually wearing it, for it to really do its job.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Proper fit, it means comfort. It means people are actually going to wear this stuff.
Exactly.
And ultimately, that's what keeps people safe. Okay, let's talk about the money question, right?
Yeah, the big one.
Who pays for all this PPE?
Yeah, who foots the bill?
The general rule, it's pretty straightforward.
Right.
The employer, they have to provide all the necessary PPE at no cost to the employee.
Okay, that's pretty clear.
With a few exceptions, of course, which we'll get into.
Okay, yeah, there's always exceptions.
There's always exceptions, right. But that main rule, that's a huge piece of, protection for workers.
It is. It means the cost of keeping people safe at work, that's a business expense. It's part of doing business, right?
Yeah.
It's not something that individual employees should have to pay out of pocket for.
Exactly. Nobody should have to, choose between their safety and their paycheck.
Exactly, no. And the aim there is to, remove any barrier. There shouldn't be any financial disincentive for employees to actually use the PPE, the protective gear.
Right, exactly. Okay, let's talk about those exceptions.
Yeah, let's get into the nitty-gritty.
Because there are some cases where employers aren't required to pay for certain kinds of PPE.
Okay.
The first one involves something called non-specialty safety toe footwear. Think like your basic steel-toe boots.
Okay, the standard steel toes.
Exactly, and non-specialty prescription safety eyewear. Like if you need prescription glasses anyway, and they happen to have, some basic safety features.
Right.
But here's the catch. This exception, it only applies if your employer allows you to wear these things off the job site.
Oh, interesting.
So if you can wear those steel toes home, or you can rock those prescription safety glasses out and about, your employer might not have to pay for them.
So it's about like dual use.
Dual use, yeah.
If you're getting personal use out of them, maybe the employer's off the hook.
Yeah, that off-site use, that's a really important thing to remember.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. And I think the reasoning there, it probably goes something like this. If these things are versatile enough to be worn outside of work, they're not just about workplace safety.
Right.
You're getting a personal benefit from them, too.
Yeah, they're serving like a double purpose.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So, on the other hand, if your job requires something really specialized, like let's say you need electrically rated boots, or maybe you need prescription eyewear that's designed for a specific hazardous environment, something really, really specific.
Yeah.
The employer's probably still on the hook for the cost there, because those things, you're not going to be wearing those to the grocery store.
Right, right. Okay, here's another interesting point about a specific type of PPE. We're talking metatarsal guards.
Oh, yeah, metatarsal guards.
Those are the things that cover the top of your feet.
Right.
So if an employer provides separate metatarsal guards, right, but an employee decides, hey, I'd rather just wear boots that have metatarsal protection built in, it's all one piece.
Yeah, integrated.
Yeah, the employer doesn't have to reimburse the employee for that extra cost of those integrated boots.
Oh, interesting.
So it's like the employer's provided a baseline level of protection, right?
Right.
But if the employee wants to go above and beyond and choose a more, maybe a pricier option, that's their choice.
It gives some flexibility.
It does, but it also draws a clear line when it comes to the employer's financial responsibility.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the employer, in that case, they've done what they're required to do. They've offered that metatarsal protection. And if the employee wants to go with something a little fancier, that's totally fine. But it doesn't automatically mean the employer has to pay the difference.
Yeah. Okay, let's be super clear about what the regulation does not consider employer-paid PPE, right?
Okay, good. Yeah, we got to clarify that.
This is important. Everyday clothing. The stuff you'd probably wear no matter what your job is, like regular long-sleeve shirts, normal pants, street shoes, basic work boots without any special safety features, that's all on you.
Right, right.
And same goes for things you wear just for the weather, like your winter coat, gloves, a hat, raincoat, regular sunglasses, sunscreen. It makes sense, right? Those are things most people need anyway.
Yeah, those are personal items, right? It's about drawing that line between, your regular everyday clothes and the specialized gear that's required because of hazards at work.
Right, exactly. Like those hazards, those are specific to the job. It's not just about, general comfort or what you like to wear on a daily basis.
Exactly. It's got to be tied to a workplace hazard.
Okay, here's another common scenario. What happens when PPE, gets worn out or damaged just through regular use?
Oh, that's going to happen for sure.
You're wearing it, you're working, things happen.
Yeah, wear and tear.
The regulation is clear on this. Employers have to pay for replacement PPE.
Okay, good.
Unless the employee lost it or intentionally damaged it. So if it's just normal wear and tear, that's on the employer.
Makes sense.
But if you, lose your safety glasses or you deliberately break your hard hat, you might be on the hook for that replacement cost.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. You got to be responsible, right? Take care of the equipment.
Be responsible, yeah. Okay, let's say you already own PPE. Good quality stuff that meets all the safety standards.
Okay.
The regulation says that if you provide your own equipment and it's adequate for the job, your employer can let you use it and they don't have to reimburse you.
Okay.
However, and this is a really important however, employers cannot require you to provide your own PPE or pay for it.
Right.
Unless it falls under those very specific exceptions that we talked about earlier, like the off-site use thing.
Right, right.
So they can't say, hey, you got to buy your own hard hat.
Right, that's shifting the cost, yeah.
Unless it's one of those very specific situations.
Exactly. And this really reinforces that idea that we talked about before, that the employer, they're responsible for safety.
Right.
It's on them.
Yeah.
Providing and paying for PPE, that's part of their responsibility. They can accept employee-provided equipment if it's up to par, but they can't make you buy your own stuff as a condition of working there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Unless, like we said, it falls into those exceptions.
Now, just for context, this particular section of the regulation, it went into effect on February 13th, 2008. And employers, they had until May 15th of that same year to actually implement these payment rules.
Okay, so this isn't brand new stuff. This has been around for a while.
This is established stuff. These are the standards. Okay. One last thing, and this is a big one.
Right.
There's an important note at the end of this whole section.
Hit me with it.
It says that if another OSHA standard, another regulation, has specific payment rules for certain types of PPE, those specific rules, they trump this general section.
Oh, so this might not be the only place to look.
Exactly. Depending on your industry, depending on the specific hazards you're dealing with, there might be other regulations out there more tailored to your situation that have different or maybe even more detailed requirements.
So you got to do your research.
You got to do your research. You got to know your industry.
It's not just as simple as reading this one section.
No, it's not always that simple.
Okay.
So, to wrap this all up, for all of you listening out there, taking this deep dive into PPE regulations, it really reveals some crucial things about staying safe at work and who's responsible for footing the bill for that safety. Knowing these rules, it empowers you. It helps you understand your rights, your employer's obligations.
It does, yeah.
And those little details, those exceptions, like that off-site use condition, those are things you really want to keep in mind.
Yeah, those are the things that can trip you up, so you got to pay attention to those.
Really?
Whether you're an employee and you just want to know what you're entitled to, or you're an employer and you want to make sure you're doing things by the book, keeping your workplace safe and compliant. These guidelines, they lay the groundwork. They set the standard for protection.
Right.
And they spell out those responsibilities.
Yeah, it's all about a safer, more equitable work environment for everybody.
Exactly.
Now, here's something I want you all to think about. We talked about all these exceptions, all their specific situations, and that important note about other more specific regulations potentially being in play.
Right.
How might these rules, which seem pretty straightforward on the surface, how might they actually get really complicated in different industries?
Yeah.
Or even across different roles within the same company? What other questions does this bring up for you about how those general PPE regulations, they bump up against the very specific safety demands of certain kinds of work?
Right.
It's a fascinating topic, and I encourage you to keep thinking about it.
Thanks for joining us today on The Deep Dive. Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a good one.
Absolutely.